Colleagues, I think we have reached a quorum, and it's about time as well. And the first agenda item is a meeting with deputations at administration. And back in November 13 meeting, we agreed that to invite the deputations made on the July 31st, and to comment on the revised proposal on the composition of the Medical Council of Hong Kong, as well as the draft committee's stage amendments concerning the composition of the Medical Council of Hong Kong proposed administration. And on November 14, the Secretariat has sent out the invitations, and the deputations and individuals must reply by November 21st. And the Bills Committee will hear deputations from 12 deputations and individuals on the comments on the revised proposal, and Secretariat can invite the deputations, and we already have the government reps here. So I'm not going to introduce them individually. So we have Mr. Fong, Mr. Fong, and Mr. Feng Pen Chung, Mr. Natalie Lai Wai Kwan, and Department of Health, Mr. Lai Yuk Kwan, and Dr. Joseph Siu Wing Hong, Deputy Secretary, Medical Council, Department of Health, and Ms. Cindy Chuk Wing Hong, Senior Government Counsel, Department of Justice. So we welcome the deputations. Well, if you're familiar with the rules and procedures, and please speak through the microphone and the headset. And 0 is Florida, channel 1 is Cantonese, channel 2 is English, and channel 3 for Putonghua. And then reminded the deputations that when addressing the Bills Committee, you will not be covered by the protection and immunity provided under the Legislative Council Power and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382. The written submissions will also not be covered by the ordinance. And please take note of the security measures set out in the note for members of the public attending meetings in conference room or observing meetings in public galleries in the Legislative Council complex. The note has been attached in the invitation by the Secretariat, as well as tabled in front of you. And the members of the public at the gallery can request for a copy of the note from the nearby security staff. And we have a rather short meeting today, and you should mainly comments, and hopefully you can just focus your deputations on the proposed comments that you'll be allocated 3 minutes. And you do have any written submissions, and please submit to the Secretariat after the meeting, which will then forward them to our fellow members. And wish the deputations to speak according to the seating plan arrangement. And since Mr. Choi Kin of HK Medical Association have other commitments and request to speak first. So we shall go back to the original arrangement. We have 3 minutes now. Thank you, Chairman. The Medical Association would accept the amendment to the bill. However, let me remind it that the public, that if the rules procedure of the HKAM elections, if not done properly, it will make a problem. About a decade ago, I took part in the election of the board of the council of the HKAM. There were 5 seats up for elections. There were 6 people running. I was elected by the 3rd highest vote. And after being elected, the HKAM sent me a letter that because I am a 2 fellows of the 2 specialist college, and I need to defeat the candidates of both specialist colleges in order to be elected. So I did not mention that when I first run. So at the end, and they come remind me of this. So we're not able to establish the rules and procedures of the election, who can run and who cannot be run, and who can nominate. And there are 2 or 3 specialist colleges fellows joining the race. Will they need to defeat the other candidates from the other specialist colleges in order to be run or be elected? I think Professor Lau needs to establish that and let the public know, so that the HKAM election will be smooth and clear. Thank you, Chairman. Next, Mr. Chan Wai-kit. Today I will speak about on behalf of the patients. Doctors are the last hope of patients. We have very much respect for the doctors of Hong Kong. I hope the doctors can understand that the Hong Kong public are very trustful of them, and they could try to trust the Hong Kong public as well. Why the patients would need to sue the doctors all the way to the High Court? Because they're not able to get the truth they want. They were seeking the truth. They do not intend to sue the doctors out of a job. I don't think the patients started with that intentions. The truth is the most important. Once we get to the truth and give a clear account and give a good explanation, that they can reconcile and reach an agreement, instead of taking to the court and took a medical counsel. If under mediation, and if asking family members or the victims to sue in a medical counsel and take an oath, probably they wouldn't bother. These steps would not be necessary. So what we're seeking is justice. Because under the current mechanism is quite unjust, so we need a reform. And this we support of this government's revised proposal. So we also have the apology ordinance as to protect the doctors as well. There's also the mediation legislation and mediators and so on. So the doctors and hospitals and patients and do all learn how to mediate and to resolve problems instead of resorting to legal action. So let me reiterate that it's not that we hope to sue the doctors to make them without a job. That's not our intention. I hope that no patient or family members were hoping this. So that we should learn to mediate, to discuss the apology legislation to resolve any problems. I hope that we have so many victims here. Let's listen to their voices. I think you listen carefully what their real intentions are. That's all for me. Thank you. Next, Hong Kong Doctors Union, Dr. Young Chiu Fat Henry. The Hong Kong Doctors Union have welcomed the government's the revisions to the Medical Registration Amendment Bill 2017 in converting the 2 seats from the Hospital Authority and Department of Health to direct elections among fellow doctors. But understand that the 2 seats were allocated to the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine, which will be elected through election of all elected fellows. So they're still working out on the details of the election. However, our main point of concern in the future, there will be 2 elected HKAM members, and 2 of them will be appointed. And those elected and appointed HKAM members may be in conflict.
Should there be a difference of opinion, then at the medical council, which representative of the academy would the members should the members listen? Because as the Academy of Medicine, they would oversee the training of all specialist doctors, and this is very important for doctors and patients. For these 4 elected and appointed members of the academy, so why don't we simply elect 4, representatives? Also, the other question is, do we need 4 representatives from the Academy of Medicine? We don't need 4 representatives from the CU and the Hong Kong U. I think we can do with 2. The government is now making a concession. The Department of Health and the HA are now represented by 1 member each. So I've worked at the medical council for many years. Whenever there's any instruction from the government, if they are reasonable, they have never been rejected. We've always agreed with the government's rules, especially the rules of the academy as to the training of specialists. So I don't think the academy should need 4 members, and they could do it 2. So I said that. For the why do we have 7 members representing the doctors? If the 2 positions are released and given to the academy, then the government is not. They would not be representing the other doctors who are not specialists. The government now want to promote primary health care, and I think that is also recommended by the WHO. If we do a good job, then the non-specialist doctor would really should take a lot of credit. Why is it that we don't give an opportunity to doctors who are not non-specialists instead of giving more seats to the Academy of Medicine? Next, Mr. Leung Chi-Young. The Hong Kong Patients Alliance supports the proposed revision to the Medical Registration Amendment Bill. I am aware that at early meetings of this committee, I'm worried about your deliberation because last year your deliberations on the bill, I think when you discussed the initial proposal, there was a lot of discussion, including the 4+4 option, 6+6 option, and then +2 and -2 options which were put forward. Today I'm worried that apparently among the doctors, although there now seems to be a consensus, that is Dr. Au Yu-kai proposed, an option. That is, the Department of Health and the HA should give up 1, seat each to the academy. But apparently, there's another round of discussion as to how the members representing the Academy of Medicine should be elected. And if that discussion should continue, I'm worried that this bill may not be enacted within this year. The concern of the medical profession really is not necessary. Right at the beginning, they want to maintain a 50% ratio because they want to maintain the professional autonomy of doctors. But now we're giving 4, seats to the Academy of Medicine, and instead of 2 members on the council, the Department of Health and the HA now only have 1. But the medical profession still insist on extended the deliberation on the representation of the Academy of Medicine. As a result, I'm worried that I'm very disappointed that the bill will not be able to enact it as soon as possible. And if that's the case, I would rather that those 2 seats be returned to the Department of Health and the HA instead of adding 2 more seats for the Academy, because this would not have any major impact. In the past, how many doctors have been concerned about the electoral procedure of the Medical Society? How many people are concerned as to how the Department of Health and the HA would, select 2 representatives on the council? But all these debates are now causing obstacles to the enactment of this bill. I'm worried that this may actually damage the reputation of all doctors, and the reform of the Medical Council will not be able to proceed. Thank you. Dr. Maxwell King, representing the Hong Kong Public Doctors Association. Thank you, Chairman. I represent the Hong Kong Public Doctors Association to submit our views on the proposed bill. I think our members have all unanimously agreed to support the proposed amendment bill. That is, the Department of Health and HA should give up 1 seat each for the registered doctors to vote, and so that it will allow more people in the profession to participate in the work of the medical council. And this will address the issue of the Department of Health and HA not being able to, also discharge its duties or take care of the work in relation to the medical council. We have heard the views from many stakeholders, and I believe that the proposed amendment this time has taken on board the views of many in the profession. But in the present amendment, I think Dr. Ausil, you guys' proposal has not been accepted. Namely, the 2 seats surrendered by the Department of Health and the HA be given to the Academy and to be elected by its fellows. Of course, this would affect the non-specialist doctors. On the other hand, we understand that the general public, as Mr. Lam said, expect the medical council should be able to carry out the reform as soon as possible, and that there should be more representation from the Academy of Medicine. And this shows, well, given that the number of specialists is increasing, and therefore we are in favor of the proposal in the bill regarding the proposed amendments to the bill. We hope that the deliberation of the bill can continue to proceed. We hope that in the bill, the government can provide a clearer and more detailed explanation regarding the 2 seats to be given to the Academy of Medicine. What should be the electoral arrangements to ensure that we can ensure that these 2 new seats for the Academy will be elected, nominated in a fair manner by the fellows of the Academy. And we'll be happy to continue to support the development of the medical profession. Next, we have Madam Tang Sao Or from the Consumer Council. Thank you, Chairman. I represent the Consumer Council. We welcome the government's proposal in respect to the amendments to the composition of the Medical Council. By increasing the number of seats for the Academy of Medicine, it can enhance the Academy's ability to regulate or supervise the specialists. We also like the bill to be enacted as soon as possible so that we can enhance the efficiency in handling complaints and ensure that the complaints are handled fairly and effectively. Next, we have the Mr. Wu Chao Wan representing chronic patients, chronically ill patients. First of all, we welcome the government's proposal. In July 2017, the Doctors Association made a joint submission to LegCo requesting that the appointed members of the Academy should become elected members. In the consensus in 2017, they proposed that the 2 members representing the Academy of Medicine are very important, and therefore they should not be elected. They should be appointed instead. If the government were to accept these 2 proposals, then it would mean that there will be 4 members representing the Academy of Medicine on the council. Namely, there will be 2 appointed and 2 elected members. I don't understand why we have Doctors Association don't understand the government's proposal, because all these proposals come from the medical profession, and you can confirm this through the literature. I hope the Doctors Association will go back and look at the information they submitted to LegCo. Secondly, the composition and electoral arrangements are 2 separate issues. Composition means that if you agree that the Academy should be given 4 seats, then it's different. It's not the same. It's not about the electoral procedure. So it would, if we empower the Academy of Medicine to elect its members, while at the same time, restricting or defining the way the Academy elects its representatives, it would be a contradiction, because we're empowering the Academy and yet we are regulating the way to elect the members. We very much hope that we will be able to have the bill enacted as soon as possible, because we know that if the bill were not enacted, at least we have to wait for another 6 years, 6 years before a complaint is actually, handled. But if this this proposal is not, passed, we don't know how much longer we have to wait. So we hope that the amendment bill can be enacted as soon as possible. If you think that there are too many, I think at least the members of representing the Academy are elected. If you think that there are too many seats for the Academy, then shouldn't the 7 seats representing the medical society should be elected by all the doctors in Hong Kong? Mr. K. Chi-Fai. Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon. My father passed away because of a medical incident last year. During the public hearing on medical reform, I also attended that forum. I support the present reform proposal, although it's not the best proposal. I really like to query the function of the Medical Council. Are they really fighting for the interests of doctors, or shouldn't they adopt a transparent and fair system to deal with complaints involving patients and doctors? Other than hoping that during the current this year the medical reform will be passed and that Medical Council will improve its administrative procedures. For example, the Medical Council should disclose to complainants what are the reasons why a complaint is not entertained, and also in the course of investigation all the defenses put up by the doctors, the experts' results, and the reasons behind the report. More importantly, the complainant should be allowed to respond to such information and should be able to appeal. I also think that Medical Council should provide for the complainant, support, so that they would know how many doctors are involved in the complaint and what are the relevant ordinances. Because in a single medical incident, it may involve more than one doctor and more than one piece of legislation. Very often, many victims are not complaining because they don't know what is meant by medical incident, what's its definition, and they don't know what they should complain about, and they don't even know how to complain. And that's why the Medical Council, together with the HA and the Department of Health, should proactively be involved in the investigation into medical incidents, and the whole process and the findings of the investigation should be disclosed to the public so that the Medical Council can be more transparent. To successfully complain against the doctor is very difficult at the moment. The Medical Council therefore should set up a fair system to deal with complaints regarding doctors performing below standard. If that should increase the workload of the Medical Council, then we should set up a complaint mechanism which is independent of the Medical Council. On the other hand, I think there should be a comprehensive review of the medical registration ordinance. There should be periodic review so that we can continue to improve the policy of medical care. I think all members of the public, be they rich or poor, should be able to get proper treatment when they're ill. So we're not depriving the rights of the doctor. Right now, it's just the doctors are afraid that the interest would be, taken away by others. So they don't care about the patients because it's not their relatives. But for the patients and the families, we are talking about, their families suffering, and they have this, so we hope that all the doctors would really, help ensure that the bill is enacted. I represent the Hong Kong Doctors Association. Last year in the QMH, a patient died because the pipe was, pulled out improperly, and the patient was my grandfather. During the public hearing early on, I also hesitated whether I should attend. I don't know whether people will listen to our complaint. When we complain to the Medical Council, we have to wait for many years for the complaint to be handled. Reform of the Medical Council has, we've been waiting for many years. Whenever there's a medical incident, the doctors will blame it on manpower shortage. We all know that we don't have enough doctors. If we want to bring in doctors with limited registration working in public hospitals, and these are internationally qualified specialists, and they still need to be approved by the Medical Council. And despite that, there are doctors in Hong Kong who would object to that because the interest would be jeopardized. So that actually simply ignoring the interest of the public. Doctors, some doctors would like to defend their interests. Some members of the council who are, especially those who are doctors, have been asking trivial questions in order to protect the interests of their profession and to object to the proposal on political grounds and filibuster. Do they have to be like us, to have family members who suffer from medical incidents before they realize the urgent need for medical reform? And therefore, we are fighting. We say that there should be an increase in the number of lay members so that doctors will not predominate the council, because the medical council should uphold justice and rather than a union to protect the interests of doctors. I hope the honourable members would really listen to the voice of the patients, and that you'll be able to enact the amendment bill this year so that the medical council can really, achieve its mission.
Ms. Yip Su Lei, today what I want to say is that the HK Medical Council and the doctors should stop stalling. Instead, every time having the deputations every time, and help make them help rally more doctors to protect among your own interests, and turning the HKMC into some kind of club as a family member of a patient. We hope that we can complete the complete procedure within a limited time. Waiting for 6 or 7 years for a complaint to be investigated is a torture. Why do you claim that the election HKAM is not fair? Why are you when you discuss this in this bill committee? I don't understand why Mr. Choi of HKMA, the dean of the Medical Association, will bring out newcomers. However, seems to be self-conflicting every time. As a fellow member of a patient, we hope that the legislative members can expedite the passage of this bill so that the HKM's reform can be speed up and enhance transparency. Instead of when making a complaint for the HKMC, that we receive a letter that claims that according to Section 186, the complaint would deal with, and then the phrases would have forwarded to the doctors and heard nothing since. It gets to the point of so untransparent that there's no explanation that what the doctors have said or what the medical council deliberately counsels, and yet we have to forward the complaints to the medical council. I hope that we can enhance the reform at HKMC as a patient family member. This time we shall accept the proposal for now, for in the long run, then we should have a regular review every 3 or 5 years. That's the end of the speech. Thank you. The committee organizer of the Society for Community Organization, Mr. Pang. Thank you for inviting our organization to speak on the hearing. Upon receiving invitation, I felt rather quite strange, since that we ever had a hearing back in July. As for this time we asked to speak on the revised proposal tabled by the government. I believe that in the beginning of November, the relevant organizations have already submitted their opinions by writing to the chairman of the committee, and on November 8th, we have also issued our submission. So after hearing so many organizations, we agreed to the revised proposal. So I found rather strange that since we all agreed on this, that we need to discuss it one more time. That seems to be an impede the work of this bills committee. So as we have the victims as well as patients organizations express a strong desire for the passage of the amendments, so that the HKMC reform can take a new step. How the point contention falls into the 2 seats elected by the HKAM. There's no legal legislation on how the HKM should carry out the elections. And a statutory body that is something that's fall within its own jurisdiction and probably not to be discussed in LegCo. As for why there are doubts that HKAM are giving 4 seats, at the same time we can also question that why the Hong Kong Medical Association have 7 seats. Shouldn't it reduce its number of seats? So for HKAM, so do we allow everybody to run in the election? The HKAM represent the training and the professional standards of the special doctors. For those who just obtain their specialist qualification and also have a chance to win, will they able to take part in the HKMC on behalf of the HKAM to represent the professionalism and standards and to comment on the complaint cases, investigation? If you need representing on behalf HKAM in this work, we felt that there should be a qualification required, maybe have 5 years or so of special experience to fulfill this role. And finally, and 3 years after this amendment, I hope the HKAM and the government should evaluate the effectiveness of the amendment to see any further amendment necessary. And we look forward at the next round of the amendment would happen in 5 years. For example, watching towards the ratio of 1:1 of doctors and laypersons, as well as being the process independent of the HKMC. HK Academy of Medicine, Dr. Professor Lau. Sorry for being late. So simply put, the AKM welcomed the addition of 2 more seats to HKAM because the number of specialist doctors has increased, and in the HKMC we could participate as well as a training and certification to have a place as well. The HKAM hope to seek the views of the public, especially those from the fellows of the HKAM. So we decided that on November 30th that there would be a consultation forum to collect the views from our fellows on the arrangements, nomination, and election mechanisms of the 2 additions from the HKAM. And we're also a statutory body, and hopefully by December meeting we will discuss the views that we collected. Hopefully by mid-January or the end of January, that we can arrive at the electoral procedure that will be disclosed to the public. Thank you. Professor Lau, since you have some time left, I think our members have some question. You mentioned that mid to end of January you will arrive with decision. So do you have a timetable, or do you have the council of the HKM should decide on the election method, or to see that with all the 7,000 fellows with support, or do you have some kind of procedure, or when do you inform the government of the electoral procedure? So the forum only will happen the end of this week, so I can't say right away that when we can tell the government. But hopefully if we reach the consensus, so by mid-December in the council meeting we can discuss, by mid-January we can disclose the plan, and if all the fellows agreed, then we can tell the government ASAP. So what sort of consensus? Is it the council of the HKAM or the majority of the fellows? It should be from the council, because all the affairs go through the council of the HKAM. Mr. Fong, would you like to respond to the deputations today? We thank all the deputations. We have read your submissions and heard your representations. We agreed that this bill has this urgency to pass as soon as possible in order to increase the accountability. and the transparency and credibility of the medical council, and hopefully we can really greatly enhance the complaint handling efficiency, and by increasing the lengthening the registration period of limited registration doctors, we can attract more overseas trained doctors to perform more frontline clinical work. So the government would work with the legislature in terms of the vetting, and hopefully for the early passage of this bill. That's all my report. Members, we shall open the floor to questions. We have Chen Pu-yin, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki. Any others would like to speak? 4 minutes each. Mr. Chen Pu-yin. Dr. Pierre Chen. Thank you for coming to the public hearing. So we have the first and second, and finally go to the Bills Committee, and then we shall do a clause-by-clause vetting. So after incorporating the amendments, then we'll have a second reading and vote at the full council sitting. Yeah, there's several sittings of the Bills Committee. We are already in the clause-by-clause phase. So talk about the committee without amendments, and maybe there are changes to be anticipated in the wordings. So legal counsel also come up with about 10 pages worth of questions. So we are more just an argue. So it's more than the dispute on the HKAM members. So whether appointment or not. So when medical council members need to leave the council, need to leave due to poor health or disqualified, this are the actual word need to be dealt with. So we already entered the classical clause vetting stage. We also understand the public aspiration that the bill will have to move forward, and there will be called the bill to be shelved. We have still 3 years to go in this legislative term. That we shall finish the vetting and restore the second reading. We're not meant to cause the bills to be shelved, so we need to do some careful vetting. So this is the job of this Bills Committee. So I find some figures, and for the cases done by HKMC, there are 600 or so cases. A majority of them, for each 100 cases, there are about 3 to 5 we get to the inquiry stage. As compared to other professional bodies, for example, a legal society, barristers, bar association, HKCPA, and other kind of industry bodies, the British and the Singapore Medical Association, therefore 3 to 5 cases of over 100 cases will go to inquiry stage. But 90-something cases will not take 9 or 6 years to deal with. So the 90-something cases or so would already be investigated in the preliminary inquiry committee stage. So admitting at the inquiry, there will be time constraints because in the middle you have the legal procedures. For example, like the DR case currently is on trial, and the HK Medical Council couldn't do anything. So that's why the deadline kept getting postponed, because they have a lot of legal motions to go through.
So looking at numbers, only 3 to 5 cases would require to be dealt with through legal procedures. 95 to 97 cases out of 100 would not need to take so long. So I hope you will look at the numbers and be fair. The figures, proposed, shown to scope by the government is a little bit misleading, and many people in the media has also quoted such numbers. As I said, the doctors would prepare to make concessions so that we can continue to move forward, and I'm sure that we'll be able to have the bill enacted. Dr. K.K. Kwok. You have 4 minutes. First of all, I'd like to thank the deputations for coming today. I believe many members in this council are like yourselves. That is, we want this bill to be passed. But I think you must understand that in the bill earlier, or actually until the last term of LegCo had deliberated on the bill, the government not made any concessions, and these recent changes was only put forward by the administration since when the new term of LegCo, began. As LegCo members, we have a duty to deliberate on these new proposals. You must understand that we're dealing with a very complex issue, and we don't like Hong Kong to be like the mainland, where the relevant organizations are like rubber stamps. In this council, if we fail to, pass the legislation, it may not just be the fault of members, because this council is now doing something to curb the power of LegCo members and the government. There are some bills in the pipeline which the government is not even submitting them to this council for vetting. So it's not easy to really try to maintain Hong Kong as a just society. I agree with many of the patient groups. The suggestion that, well, first of all, I was the first one to suggest that we should have 4 members of the medical council to represent patient groups. So I have no disrespect for the patient groups at all. But what we don't want to see is to make all the professional bodies to become pawns of the administration, which the government can manipulate. Take, for example, the proposal to expedite the disciplinary hearings. And in the present proposal for the Medical Council, it is suggested that we're going to set up many, panels to conduct hearings. And the government is not just the government. I also had suggested, and other members have suggested that we should, provide more resources for the PIC. So don't think that if we don't listen to the government that we are jeopardizing the interests of patients. That is not our intention. Like yourselves, we would like all the bills to become law. I'm grateful to Professor Lau for attending our hearing in person today, because I have a question for him. Last time when we discussed this issue, your Deputy Dean, Professor Leung, came. We heard him saying that these 2, seats proposed for the academy, the government's explanation was that these posts are to be elected by the Academy of Medicine. Now, if you allow anyone to stand for election, I don't think we should allow any improper threshold. The seats representing the Academy, the members elected should represent the Academy of Medicine. And I don't think we should impose any restrictions because this is the prerogative of the Academy of Medicine. The original intention for assigning these 2 seats for the Academy is to increase more seats for the doctors to elect among themselves the representatives. The government did not accept. Chairman, can I continue? How long will you? How much more time would you need? Well, this is the time. This is the time for members to ask questions of the deputations. But it would appear that yourself and Dr. Chen are just expressing your personal opinion. Don't tell me that. All right, Alice Mack. Okay, and then Dr. Kwok can go for a second round. First of all, I'd like to thank the deputations and the patient groups for coming to our hearing today, especially the relatives of the victims of medical incidents. For them to have to repeat their painful experience once again is not very fair. Many people claim credit for the for the bill to be moved. But I think the people who made the greatest contribution are the patients and the family members. You've all actually put in a lot of time and effort in pushing for the medical reform. Especially when you had to cope with the departure of your family members and to fight this battle at the same time. So we're really grateful to you and really appreciate your courage. That is, this battle, which has been ongoing for so many years, I think the biggest credit should go to you all. I heard some people, I always say that the present proposal is very strange. The government claims it is making concessions, so do the doctors. So I don't know who is making concession. I think the party which makes the greatest concession are the patients and their family, because having fought the battle for so long, they would like to see an outcome. We don't want to see again the painful experience of the bill being aborted because of filibustering. In a while, I'm going to ask Mr. Pang, Hong Chang, I don't think you would agree that this is the best or the perfect option. But could you tell us why this time you're willing to accept the present proposal and that you will not object anymore? Is it that with the passage of this amendment bill, we can proceed with the reform of the Medical Council? And after we've done that, do we still have a lot of work to do going forward? Mr. Tam. Could someone switch on the mic for Mr. Pang? In an ideal system, we hope that we should have a 1-to-1 ratio. That is a 1-to-1 ratio between doctors and lay members. An example, we'd like the Medical Council in the UK, they have 12 members, 6 doctors and 6 lay members. Well, that would be the ideal scenario. We're now talking about a ratio of 1-to-6. So to migrate to 1-to-4, 1-to-3 is already an improvement. Because of this improvement, we're willing to accept the reform, and we look forward to the next stage of reform. So I hope that going forward, we will explore whether we need to increase further the number of lay members representing patients. On the complaint mechanism, you're now expanding the pool of assessors. So you're taking this away from the member of the Medical Council, and this is moving towards our other goal. That is, the handling of complaints should be more independent of the Medical Council. This is the same in the UK's Medical Council. The adjudicator panels are not represented by members of their Medical Council at all. We believe that this is a system which, at the next stage of review, is something that we should look at and see whether we could, do that. Thirdly, other than the amendment of the ordinance, there are certain administrative, aspects of the operations of the Medical Council which need to be looked at. For example, we don't know what information the doctor being complained against has submitted to the Medical Council. They don't know about the legal advice and so on, and that's not very fair for the patients. So I hope that we can improve the administrative procedure so that complaints could be handled more fairly. The present proposed amendments are moving towards that direction to some extent, and therefore we're willing to actually, compromise and accept the present proposal. Chairman. We're talking about medical reform in Hong Kong. Of course, I don't want to shift our focus. But the government has now put forward this proposal, and we want the proposal to be acceptable to the government, the doctors, and the patients. But I really find it regrettable that some of our colleagues have actually, make comments like we need to defend one country system, or Hong Kong, this country is becoming like the NPC-SC. I mean, I don't know what's the relevance there. We're working so hard to try to find a compromise so that we can accept this proposal. Why politicize everything? For every time we discuss any topic, we say that you always say that we are like the NPC. I believe that the present proposal put forward by the government is the result of a very long, period of work. it has already, of course, for the doctors and the patients, they may think that it may still not be the perfect, solution. But in the course of seeking for a compromise, it's exactly because different stakeholders are so concerned. If this proposal is not up to the satisfaction 100%, but the question is whether or not they still find it acceptable. So I therefore would like to ask the doctors and the patient representatives whether or not you are willing to accept the present package. I would like to see a package that we are able to support and which everybody would accept. Would you like to put this question to any of the deputations? I think I'll leave it up to them to respond. Mr. Lam Chiao. Thank you. In our earlier discussion, I really regret want to hear Dr. Pierre Chen quoting other professional bodies and the way they handle complaints and mode of operation, and compare that with the medical council. The medical council deals with the ethics of doctors. If doctors are not ethical, people may die. In other professions, nobody would die because of the misconduct of the members. Comparing the medical profession with other professional bodies, it's really regrettable. And secondly, he said that this bill will not be aborted. I'm really worried because people, the fact that it will not be aborted doesn't mean that it will not be slowed down, because there's 3 more years in the current session. I'm worried that in the last few days, the last few weeks of the current session, we're going to see what happened during the last term of this council. So I hope in this council, especially the doctors, members of doctors, would seriously ask whether we should delay this further, and that if the bill were only to be enacted 3 years later, it would be too late, because other incidents might have happened in the course of these 3 years. Mr. Chen Kok-kwan, follow up? No. Mr. Jonas Ho. Chairman, I have a question for the department. Mr. Pang Wing-chun said that, all right, he is prepared to accept the present proposal. In the UK, the ratio is 1:1. We have a ratio of 1:3. The doctors still predominate in the council. Well, I personally don't have any strong views, but since Mr. Pang Chung pointed out that this is in the UK, the ratio is 1:1. So, Mr. Fong, if in the present amendment bill, we want it to be enacted ASAP. Let's accept 1:3 first. The ratio 1:3 first. Does the department have a projection as to whether we will be migrating towards are we going to break down all the red tapes, and will you steadily increase the number of lay members so that eventually you will arrive at a 1:1 ratio? I think you are asking sort of the impossible of Mr. Fong. Thank you. In the Medical Manpower Planning and Development Strategy Review, we had suggested that the professionals, the ratio between the lay members and the medical professionals, we note that the lay members now only make up a minority in the medical council. We believe that to start with, there should at least be 25% of lay members on the council, and it's clearly stated in that report. Later on, we'll be writing to all these professional bodies and invite them to look at the representation of the lay members and see how they can, do better in that area. And this is a direction that we've already, stipulated in the report. Thank you. I really support this direction. Right now, you have 4 members who are appointed by the CE, I mean the lay members. There will be another 3 to be nominated by patient groups. And appointed by the CE, and another one appointed by the Consumer Council. Next time, perhaps you can consider for to extend the power of the Consumer Council to make appointments. For patient groups, there are now 3 members. Perhaps you can consider increasing the number so that the ratio 1 to 3 could be adjusted forwards. You have 32 members in future. Membership of the Medical Council could be 35 or 36. I don't know whether you want an odd number, even number. Let's see whether we can, create 4 more, increase the number of seats by 4. Could you tell us that next time we are going to increase 4 more members, increase the number of members to be, nominated by the Consumer Council and patient groups? Perhaps you can explore that further.
Mr. Fong, any response? Oh, I noted your comments. Thank you. Dr. K.K. Kwok, second round. So you were just starting your question. So may I ask Dr. Lau, Professor Lau, last time Professor Leung had said something different from you. He claimed that the election will have a threshold in order to represent HKM. I heard that it's good news that you're saying that it would happen fairly soon. So as the Dean of the HKM, how do you ensure that the election will be one of a low threshold or not having a unreasonable threshold? So what are the criteria to ensure that there will be a fair election for the HKAM seats? And before you arrived, and Dr. Choi of HKMA mentioned that he once run for the Council of HKM election. Let's note that some of the qualification thresholds for the election fellows are unnecessary and restricting. So when we ask the government how to ensure that the HKM elections are open and fair, the government claimed that it can't answer. They only said that they were deferred back to HKM. So that is important. Fourthly, I wonder if your sentence is the same as Professor Leung, then there will be some kind of a threshold. So tell us frankly, what is your threshold to have in mind? So for the 2 seats that are supposed to be elected, and that now controlled by the HKM. Professor Lau? Thank you, Dr. Lau. Kwok's question. I think there have been misunderstanding that we claim that we can hear the views of all sectors, but most importantly, we can hope that we can hear the voice of our fellows, because we represent the fellows and specialists. Since last year, upon the proposal, we keep on collecting views, and the opinions are different from the latest proposal. And a few weeks ago, we heard the government had come up with the latest proposal, and we are soliciting views from everyone. So reiterate that the HKAM has no preconceived notion that on any sort of threshold. However, if we need to act for the 4 or 2 colleagues representing HKAM, that there has to be a certain knowledge with the HKAM. I hope that we can discuss them face to face, and then we'll discuss at the council meeting, and they come to a final decision or consensus. So you finished your answer. So I want you to answer: do you have a threshold, and if so, what is it? So the threshold will be a knowledge of the specialist training. We never said that of this. So you talk about the threshold usually about a number of years of specialist experience. We talk about the familiarity on the specialist training and certification. So from a fresh graduate after finishing internship, so you take about 6 years of training. Then we need that member to comment on that. So after become a fellow and for the next step of certificate accreditation, that we need someone to comment on. So along the way, we do need our voices to be heard. And Professor Lau, you have to understand from what I heard from you is no different than what I said from Professor Leung. Some colleagues claim it's different. I never heard about you mentioning a threshold. So I wanted to say to you that we hope that we want to see how you handle this. So from the earliest proposal that 2 of the seats not appointed by chief executive but instead elected, now there becomes 4 seats, and 2 of them will be nominated by HKM to the chief executive and 2 other by election. So you claim that if we reach a consensus, you can come to a decision by mid-January. If there's no consensus, more time will be required for deliberations. So in the future, these 4 HKM representatives, and 2 of them will be nominated by the members and 2 of them elected. Do you think there will be work division among 4 of them? So instead of specialist training and accreditation, it encompasses a wide scope. So having these 2 additional seats, the HKAM can provide advice on different procedures. So we haven't come up with the details of how the work will be divided up among the 4 seats. So for the 2 seats appointed by the government and 2 seats by election, I think we can strike a balance that then on the welfare of strike a balance between the welfare of the fellows and the special trainees of Hong Kong. Dr. Pierre Chen, second round. So I'm in quoting the British Medical Association annual report on the number of complaints, about 9,000 in 2015. But getting to the inquiry stage, about 2.4%, lowered percentage in Hong Kong. Dr. Pierre Chen, I know that you've been sharing us with a lot of figures. However, this item was that we invited deputations to comment on the latest government proposal on the composition of the council, or the medical council. I don't think it's very relevant to the figures you quoted. You're free to say to quote them. However, and you should say that after the deputations have left this chamber, and when we discuss about that, even though I'm not supporting you, mentioned repeatedly, you can just show us in writing instead of saying it orally for considerable time. Chairman, you're taking up my time. I'm not taking up your time. I shall give it the time back to you. I think you have deviated from the purpose of this item. If you think it took up my time, I can give you 20-30 minutes. It doesn't matter. You're free to speak in that time slot. Noted. So may I ask Professor Lau that I noticed that the HKMA had a young doctors committee in which a 10-year experience is the separation. So how do you define young doctors? Can it really represent young HKAM young doctors. Maybe I have less than 10 years experience. Maybe I'm not being representative enough, or I can hear from HKM. So, what is the HKM views on this threshold or bar? I hope for it on Thursday. We can have a peaceful discussion. So, even I don't have 10 years of specialist experience myself. So, what is the HKM views on this? That's it. Professor Lau, I think you understand this question. I think you have a lot of my colleagues have asking the same question because you didn't come with the answer because you have yet to finish your consultation at the council HKM, and yet they're pressing on this question. I wonder how can you answer it repeatedly. Okay, I give you this same response: is that we have to listen to our fellows' views before we can discuss. So maybe Dr. PHA mixed up with the Young Doctors Committee and the election procedures. The Formation Committee have nothing to do with this extra 2 seats. So we're not talking about using 10 years as a cutoff. That below 10 years it came to a young doctors, and more than 10 years not regarded as young doctors per se. Do you have any questions? Feel free. Oh, none. Dr. KK Kwok, third round. I heard Professor Lau. I understand it as a dean that you not have a preconceived stance. However, in this discussion, we all care about that the electoral procedure can demonstrate, because the government claims to us that these 2 seats claim to be elected by the HKM, that it won't, and which should not intervene in the elections. However, how do we ensure that the election is free from unreasonable threshold or qualification? So I hope that at the end of the month there will be the first consultative forum, and by early December you will have a general meeting. So is it the end of next month or the first early January there will be a complete proposal? That is something that can be done by the HKM themselves in determining the qualification cutoff. Maybe even the president will not be knowledgeable of that. However, in this election there should not be any unreasonable threshold for a ordinary graduate to a fellow. It should take quite a number of years. For senior fellows like you or me, we can. So with other fellows, they represent the collective views of the other fellows. Then you will need to solicit support through other platforms. I hope that the HKM can seek members that can represent the views of a whole of HKM. As for the exact timetable, and how do you demonstrate that effectively in administrative procedures? So I think I heard there's a similar question like you raised earlier. That wasn't the final one. No one feels it's the last question. So you said that I must let him respond. What I don't want to hear is that some of the members have been repeating other members' question. So speaking of the threshold, Professor Lau had claimed, had stated that you don't. I can answer that. If I allow you this question, I hope that you won't interject when I speak. You have plenty of time. Of course, I have a lot of time. I'm older than you, so you have more time than me. I don't mean to stall this. However, you already heard the answer to your question. They already claimed that they need to see if there's any consensus by December, and we haven't get to the point how to deal with that when there's no consensus. If there's consensus, they will speak about in January. So they have yet to hear from members, and there's no consensus. How could they in a position to answer you, Professor Lau?
Chairman, of course I've heard him saying that they will get a consensus arrive at a consensus in January. Well, a consensus could take a few months or a few years. That's why I'm giving an opportunity for Professor Lau to answer my question. Why don't you take his place? Well, I can't do that. Otherwise, I would be a doctor like yourself. You're a senior fellow. That's why I cannot, take the role of the professor. So you don't have to really, put me on the spot. I don't mind that. I'm not able to be a doctor because I'm not capable enough. But I think the professor has heard your question. You don't need to put the question. I can help put the question on your behalf to Professor Lau. Well, we don't want the academy to cause any obstacle to the reform of the medical council. So I can honestly say that we will, as soon as possible, discuss the inputs that we have collected or received. And by mid or end January, I hope we'll be able to tell the government how we're going to elect our representatives. To repeat, we've never used the word, threshold. An understanding of the, specialty training is important. We've never talk about any threshold. So by the end of January, there will be a final, position. Okay, yeah, that's what I said. Hopefully, we'll have, a proposal for the government by the end of January. Mr. Kim Yun, do you have a question after hearing Dr. Chan? If there are no further questions, we'll end this item. I'd like to thank the deputations for coming. Mr. Pang, you asked why we still have to invite you to come. I understand your sentiment because in this council we do have different members with different views. That's why we want to first of all ask whether you have any views, whether you agree or not, and you can actually send written submissions to us. There are other deputations who would like to call for a hearing, and unfortunately we've spent 1 hour 10 minutes today, but it's something that I have to do. So if I understand your displeasure. Nobody wants to delay the passage of this bill. Okay, thank you very much for coming. You may now leave, and we will come back to our discussion with the administration. We're now on to item 2, follow-up actions of the issues raised at the last meeting. And we have paper CB 371-17-1801. Since the government needs to consult the patient groups and the medical council, they will give us a written reply later on. At the last meeting, members agreed with the amendments to the bill, and the committee will continue with the clause-by-clause scrutiny. At the meeting on October the 25th, we started the clause-by-clause. We were up to clause 13 of the Chinese version. Members noted at the meeting that while the government at the time had not yet provided a response to the questions raised by our legal advisor in respect of the bill, and members also agreed that we will follow up after they have responded to the questions raised by the legal advisor as in paper 2098-16-1703. The government has now, the administration now has submitted its reply in English and Chinese. They are CB bracket 2 221 1718 bracket 1. Could the government walk us through the response to points number 1 to 13. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank the legal advisor for the legal advisor's comments on the drafting aspects of the text. I had a detailed discussion with the legal advisor, and on the 9th of November, we submitted our detailed response. Most of the legal advisor's observations are involve some technical aspects, and having heard his views, we will be moving some amendments to the bill in order to tie in with the technical amendments. So now I would like to ask Deputy Secretary to briefly walk members through our responses to these issues raised by the legal advisor. Madam Lau, thank you. I'll respond to Annex 1 of the Assistant Legal Advisor's letter. Paragraph 1 to 3, I think we already responded to that at the previous meeting. In paragraph 1, the question was whether or not we are amending the basic law section, and we are satisfied that it is now compatible with Article 142 of the Basic Law. Paragraph 2 and 3, the ALA, in response to ALA's queries, we will be moving an amendment. Now, first of all, the amendment would incorporate 3AA into the designated day by the director. The third paragraph of the ALA, again, we will be moving an amendment. This is a technical amendment. Paragraph 4, the legal advisor asked about the procedure for the Academy of Medicine's electoral procedures. As I said, the HAM will, according to its own rules and procedures, elect its own representatives. The HAM Ordinance, Cap 14419, already empowered the HAM with such powers. Paragraph 5 to 9 is in respect of Article 4 of the bill. The ALA has noted that under the medical registration ordinance, appointed and lay members, the arrangements are different because the nature, the procedure they are returned are different. So whether it's the terms of office, nomination, appointment, election, and filling of vacancies, there will be different arrangements. For example, on the question of tenure, the term of office, for the appointed members, the day of the appointment will be the same as the commencement of the term, whereas for elected members, the term begins upon gazetto. We have proposing the three lay members, two represented related by patient groups and one from Consumer Council. And for the two doctors returned from the Academy of Medicine will be returned by election, and the arrangement will follow the arrangement for the election of the 7 members of representing the medical association. So the arrangement will be the same. We don't want to propose any drastic amendments. The details are already outlined in paragraph 10 to 12. Coming now to paragraph 10 of the letter, that is the order made pursuant to Section 21, and also about the appointment and electoral arrangements of the Medical Council. We've already explained that in paragraph 21 to 23, for any order made pursuant to Section 21 and 21A, a doctor under such an order cannot become a member of the Medical Council or its committees. but the health or the state of mental health of the doctor concerned may have recovered, and therefore he or she may still run for election or be nominated or be appointed. But if during the nomination an appointment made, and when there is an order made pursuant to Section 21A, and then they will not be able to hold the office of members. The bill will not change this present arrangement. Thank you, Chairman. Legal advisor, is anything you'd like to follow up? Thank you. I'd like members to consider the answers from the administration. I'd like to ask whether members have any questions from the policy aspect. Dr. K.K. Kwok. I'd like the Assistant Legal Advisor to further elaborate on the point regarding the appointed and elected members. There are two procedures. First of all, for some will be, the term will begin on the day of appointment. The other one is upon gazettal. So will this affect the composition of the medical council if during this period, let's say, if there is a need to form, a disciplinary panel, or if there's a policy meeting, would there be any impact? Because if the two systems, the two arrangements are not the same, and if some decisions are made during that period, during the disciplinary hearing, or if there's any policy decisions, will they be subject to a challenge? Whether it's the Academy of Medicine or the patient groups, the electoral procedure and the method of election, I think we don't have the details yet. For the Academy of Medicine, we're told that we have to wait until January. For the patient groups, I'm still waiting for more details from them. But for these two, groups, under the medical registration bill, should we provide clearer details? For example, for the Academy of Medicine, I heard that by the end of January they will be able to finalize the electoral arrangements. So in future, where are we going to discuss that? Under the bill or in some bylaws? Because other than the Academy of Medicine, we have to ensure that the patients in groups, and we want to ensure that there is a fair election for these three members. And we have to rely on the provisions of the bill to ensure that. Since we don't have the provision yet, will this, stall the scrutiny of the bill? Mr. Fong, let me answer a question regarding principle, and Ms. Lau will give you the details. The principle now is that at the moment, some members of the Medical Council are already appointed, some are elected. In future, we're just adding more elected members. The electoral arrangements and the commencement date for the terms will follow the present system. There won't be any change. So in the amendment, there are some technical issues. We're just, answering to the queries raised by your legal advisor. You're saying that all the members representing the patient groups are returned by election. And for the details of election, you will provide them in the subsidiary legislation. For the extra seats you are proposing to increase or add, there is no need for the CE to appoint them because they're all going to be returned by election. In fact, we're going to have fewer appointed members. Is that true? Yes, Chairman, you are correct. Right now we have 7 members elected by doctors and another 7 elected by the Council of the Medical Association. So in the future, the Medical Association and the Academy, the members to be elected by those organizations, the commencement of the term will follow that of those 14 members. But in future, the subsidiary we will need to set up a committee to vet the subsidiary legislation. If they I cannot control the Academy of Medicine, but for the election of the patients' representatives, could the government give us some preliminary, details? Mr. Fong, regarding the framework for the election of patient representatives to the council, in our brief for electoral members, the details are already, provided for in the annex of that paper. You'll find the framework there already. But of course, we need to provide more details for the subsidiary legislation. Once this amendment bill is enacted, we will submit the subsidiary legislation to this council ASAP. Will you split up the two tasks, or will you do it concurrently? For example, the election of the Academy of Medicine and the election of representatives of patient groups. For one, you haven't made a decision yet. The other one, you already have a decision. So will you submit two separate subsidiary legislation, or you do it at one go? You can't just cover one part and not the other part. You have to do it at the same time. You cannot leave the two seats for the Academy of Medicine pending and first.
For the HKAMCs, you don't have to do three subsidiary legislation because they can do according to the powers according to the HKAM ordinance. So they have their own procedures and regulations, and however, subsidiary legislation is not necessary. However, for patient organizations, subsidiary legislation is needed. So Ms. Lau have supplement. Thank you for your member's question. And the day of enactment for the bill, so we have some provisions to address that for the patients' organizations. Seats and the provisions will only be enacted at a later date. As members have asked, if some members have yet to be elected or not yet to be nominated, would it affect the operations of the Medical Council? In drafting legislation, that have been considered. And currently, the Medical Registration Ordinance and Cap 161, Section 4 already mentioned that 4(3) that the legislations about and would not. So we are of the view that the Medical Council, from time to time, we have vacancies or nominations, and these provisions will ensure that the operations of the council will not be affected. The procedures, the orders will be affected. Maybe the legal counsel can supplement that. Legal advisor, please. No supplement. The way it's drafted, that the patients organization has been explicit that there will be subsidiary legislation, so that we deal separately. However, for HKAM, according to the government revision proposal, according to the rule, just there would be explicit that the one state to be elected by subsidiary legislation, so it's up to the HKAM to decide. So we're not rule out that it will amend its own subsidiary legislation to establish this. So it depends on the HKAM. However, the right is written that we allow them to do the elections based on the rules and procedures of its own, which is different from the patient organizations. However, as they later have stipulated, have to be done through stipulated subsidiary legislation. So there will be some period that would wait for the that before the subsidiary legislation for patient organizations have been passed, the existing composition of the Medical Council will be retained. So until the fresh elections for the HKM seats are called, so do we have the kind of a gap here? We hope that the bill's passage will lead to the formation of a new composition. Thus, there will be no new vetting instead of discussed at the bills committee, from what I know. So we will take some time. So before the enactment of the subsidiary legislation, then the new Medical Council is not yet in operation. That's kind of to go going defeating the purpose of the new medical council. Second, you claim that it will go through negative vetting. That is done of our intention to ensure that the subsidiary legislation in which the election procedures and the regulations and for appeal mechanism and so on, where voters' eligibility, there will be a careful scrutiny. Mr. Fong, under the bill, the election of the patient organizations that will go through negative vetting. Back in the 2016 bill, we did not plan for the substitute legislation for the patients' organizations reps. However, for the 2017 version, the members feel that, and we felt that it is such aspiration back in 2016 bill. So in response to this, we revised the proposal that we introduce negative vetting on the subsidiary legislation for the election. For the election framework of the patients' organizations that we already have discussed in the framework for 2016. And so this would not affect integrity. After the bill had been enacted, we already start right away on the assessor. And we actually enlarged the pool of assessors in helping us to conduct the PIC and investigation work. So for the 3 patients route, we'll wait for the enactment of the subsidiary legislation for the election to take place. However, we would expedite as soon as possible. After consulting the DOJ, that we will wait for the main legislation to pass before moving the subsidiary legislation. Mr. Fong, excuse me, Chairman. I understand that's the procedure. There were 2 ways doing it. So you claim to first have a framework. So there should be some details on the framework. For example, the electoral arrangements. The biggest issue is that the voters' eligibility on the patients' organizations. Is there a mechanism in place to appeal? So what might happen is that some of the patients' organizations feel that they have been excluded. When you lack the details and no discussion, then the dispute may arise. That the election is clear that you would let as SWD, the HA, or the Society of Rehabilitation to handle the elections, unless the legislation make it really clear to empower or prescribe a voters selection mechanism under such existing mechanism to determine the eligibility of the voters. Let's say the one more familiar with the function constituencies are actually very strict for any dispute may blow up because there will be no room for discussion. For negative vetting, established first and scrutinized later. So even though it yet to be tabled, however, we still have to ensure to minimize the any potential issues. So we have this to the NGOs and the seats, so that the election result would not be challenged. This Bills Committee had an obligation to know that the government planned to do this, and we haven't expressed our concern. We will then be held accountable, and especially when they challenge the government or this patient's organizations for voters' eligibility. I hope the government can understand where we come from. So, Ms. Lau, Mr. Fong. We understand the members' concern. So even though we say it's a framework, however, we actually have some detailed information in plus, and we already discussed it with patients' organization after a few rounds of meetings. So, so we shall discuss with them quite soon, as it's been sometime since last met, in order to hammer out the details. So, on the eligibility of this voters for the patients' organizations, they have to be accepted by the permanent secretary that they are of the following. That's the permanent secretary job to accept that these organizations are a company formed under company ordinance or a society under the society ordinance. So it be either one of those. And this organization's purpose is to protect or represent a patient's rights. So maybe they can found in the charter or its actual work. And thirdly, the organization, when submitting the application within 2 years, that had registered a society or a company. So this ensures that at least 2 years of operation instead of a body they formed for the sake of election, and that organization must falls under the scrutiny of HA, Society Rehabilitation, and Social Welfare Department. We also have the flexibility of accepted or endorsed by the Permanent Secretary for the Food and Health Bureau. For if any associations can fulfill of the criteria ABC, and yet not under this framework, if they are really in quality safeguarding the patients, well, I think we should give the chance to take part in this election. So we have this provision that have been discussed and accepted by them. And for a secure and effective nomination to be nominated one elector and seconded by 4 voters. So the electoral office is done by the Office of the Medical Council, and currently they're already handling the types of the 7 doctor seats, and the election will be held every 3 years, and the nomination that each person only allowed to nominate 1 person, and the vote counting ballot will be anonymous, and each elector will be given 3 votes. The highest 3 candidates will win. So that's on top of the simple majority rule, and a tenure for the 3 lay members. However, they are free to stand for re-election. And for by-election arrangements, and if the remaining duration is less than 12 months, the medical council will arrange more than 12 months to arrange a by-election. If less than 12 months, left in tenure, then they'll be nominated by other lay members of the council for the replacement. And then by confirmed by the permanent secretary of the FHB. So this is so short that we have enough time to organize an election. So we felt it's appropriate arrangements. And we also have some transition arrangements in the case that some patients' organizations currently unregistered under the society or the company ordinance and yet performing actual work. For the first time, we allow a transition period. So even though it not be formed in times, as long as we can see they have 2 years of actual operation, then we will accept them as constituents. However, this transition region will lapse, but by then they would have been properly formed. So that was done after thorough consultation with the patients' organizations. However, if the members agree to form a subcommittee to look at the subdigitization, that would be okay to that as well. So maybe can you submit what you said in writing? That we need more. So can you report to members on whether the patient's organization at the end accept this arrangement, especially for the negative vetting bit?
其實就
The paper I referred to has already been submitted to this council. The FCR 1/F 3261-926B. So it's actually the paper that we already submitted to members during the first Bills Committee meeting. If need be, we can come back to members about the views of the patient groups. Dr. Pierre Chan? Thank you. First of all, I must commend our legal advisor, who has been most meticulous in his inquiries. He raised many questions regarding the date of articulation, and I've learned a lot from her questions. Having heard the dialogue between the two of you, could the government now tell us, that is, after the enactment of this bill, you will submit a subsidiary legislation to deal with the members representing the patient groups? Does the government have a timetable, say 6 months or a year? That is, what is the gap between the passage of the the principal legislation and the subsidiary legislation? Because this really is important. And secondly, during the hearing, we heard that we're going to increase the number of lay members on the medical council, and 25% of the members will be lay members. The administration said that this will be forwarded to other professional bodies for reference. No. I'm asking the administration whether this will have an impact on other professional bodies. I think, looking at some of the past correspondence, I think we've discussed the question of the ratio between lay member and professional members in other professional bodies. Are there other professional bodies where, they have 0 lay members? Say, for example, the Bar Association and so on. So could the government, enlighten us on that? Mr. Fong, please be brief because we need to adjourn at 4:30. Thank you. First of all, on the subject of timetable, if our discussion with patient groups goes smoothly, then 2 or 3 months after the passage of the bill, we will be able to submit a subsidiary legislation to this council. And if everything goes smoothly, the bill is enacted, then we will arrange for the election as soon as possible. But still, it would take about 6 months, 6 to 9 months. 6 to 9 months after submission. After the bill is enacted into law, 3 to 6 months after that, we hope we'll be able to stage election. Of course, it will depend also on whether or not LegCo will extend the negative vetting. So you talk to the patient groups, and then you would submit the subsidiary legislation, and then we need to go for the negative vetting procedure. We're talking about 2 procedures. 2 parallel procedures. I'd like to thank you for enlightening me on how long it would take. Are you saying that it would take, you said you would take 3 to 9 months, right? From the time this passage becomes law, we hope that within 6 to 9 months we will be able to hold the election, if everything goes smoothly. The second question is about 1/4 of the members who are lay members. I'm talking about the statutory 30 medical professions which are regulated by law. Any further follow-up? If not, I'd like to consult with members on this. Last time we are up to clause 13 by including section 3AA. Do members still have any further questions? Pages 20. 23. Are there any further questions members would like to raise? KK Kwok. For the part on assessors, I note that there is quite a lot, there is a discretion. Every organization, I think number could be 20 to 100. So there's a lot of, leeway there. I'm worried that for different organizations, given that they have so much flexibility, would there be a situation where some organizations have, more than 100, others only have 20 or 30? And secondly, I hope the assessors will have sufficient experience and expertise to be able to do the work of the assessor. You've now only fixed the number, but apparently there's no way, Dr. Kwok. Dr. Pierre Chen has also put up his hand. I thought we were able to deal with these questions, briefly. But since apparently you're going to take longer than that, why don't we deal with this question at the next meeting? I don't want to stop halfway and then we have to pick it up again at our next meeting. We're scheduled to finish. Why don't we just stop here, and at the next meeting we will start with Section 3AA, the section on assessors. The next meeting is scheduled for the 19th of December, Tuesday. We're going to start at 2:45 until 4:30, because you need to accommodate the officials who are not able to come at 2:30. So we're starting at 2:45 and run until 4:30. And being no other business, we're now adjourned. Thank you.